Bada is here with such a good content. In today's content, we will discuss 10 worst man-made disasters, and I'm sure the content won't be for a long time. Watch us till end. 10 of the world's biggest man-made disasters. Some of the biggest, most significant and most harmful man-made disasters in human history. Human history is riddled with the man-made disasters from nuclear meltdown and underwater oil spills to chemical explosion and mine collapses. Find out what exactly happened in some infamous cases and how humanity played a pivotal role in these events. So let's get started with the countdown. Number 10 is Aberfan colliery slip. Big man-made disasters don't often happen in Britain, which made the Aberfan colliery slip even more shocking. The Welsh Wherry village of Aberfan grew up around the nearby coal mine that was established back in 1969. By 1966, the settlement had grown, and the village was surrounded by 7 huge spoil piles, waste materials from mining. That's not necessarily a problem, but in October 1966, the village of Aberfan was hit by more than 6 inches of rainfall and caused a seventh spoil pile to subside at 09:15 GMT on October 21, 1966. The vast quantity of saturated debris broke free from the pile and traveled toward the village at speed between 11 to 21 miles per hour, at approximately 17 and 34 kilometers, and in waves up to 30 feet high, according to Smithsonian Magazine. The result was devastating. 144 people lost their lives in ensuing avalanche tragically, while 16 children were among the dead. According to The Independent, fast-moving material demolished a primary school and damaged a nearby secondary high school, and 18 nearby houses were destroyed. Thousands of volunteers traveled to Aberfan to aid rescue efforts, and the Prime Minister and Queen Elizabeth both visited the days of the following incident. According to the BBC, the Aberfan disasters remain one of the UK's worst mining incidents. And number 9 is the Seveso disaster. This industrial accident took place at a chemical plant north of Milan, Italy on Saturday, July 10, 1976. The factory was producing a chemical called 2,4,5-trichlorophenol, which has been used as a chemical weapon and weed killer, according to the journal Chemosphere. On die, a chain reaction ruptured the reactor, and that in turn caused 6 tons of toxic chemical to burst into the sky. The clouds settled over 6 square miles of the surrounding area, including the town of Seveso. According to the journal Environment International, children were hospitalized with skin inflammation, hundreds of residents suffered from skin condition, and huge areas of land were evacuated. Thousands of animals died or had to be slaughtered to prevent the toxic entering to the food chain. The Seveso disaster has a long-term impact too. Since 1976, studies have found that more local residents died from cardiovascular and respiratory disease, and certain types of cancer increase the frequency in affected areas. Number 8 is Chernobyl meltdown. The explosion at Chernobyl is one of the world's most infamous man-made disasters, and with good reason. It started innocently enough, with the engineer performing a routine experiment that was supposed to find out the plant's emergency water cooling would work during a power outage. The test had been carried out previously, but not on this occasion. There was a power surge and the engineer couldn't shut down the Chernobyl nuclear reactors. Steam built up on one reactor. The roof was blown up, the nuclear cores exposed, and the radioactive material was released into the atmosphere. Workers and firefighters were hospitalized, and 28 people quickly passed away from acute radiation exposure. It took nearly 2 weeks and military intervention to extinguish the fire. Crucially, it took more than a day from 500,000 residents of nearby Pripyat to be evacuated. Following this, the government established a 19-mile exclusion zone and built up containment dome over top of the site. In the years following incident, studies estimated that thousands of people have succumbed cancer because of the radiation. It's one of the most expensive disasters in history, and it's estimated that containment and cleanup efforts will continue until 2065. Number 7. Montana asbestos cloud. The Libby, Montana began with settlers arrived in 1800s. The town expanded thanks to mine and railroad construction. In 1919, the discovery of mineral called vermiculite changed the Libby's fate. Vermiculite has loads of uses from gardening to car parts, and the mine in Libby was producing 80% of the world's supply by 1963. That's great and lucrative, but some kinds of vermiculite contain asbestos, the exceptionally dangerous substance that can cause a huge range of lung disease. The vermiculite in Libby, Montana did contain asbestos, and the mining company knew about its dangerous side effects. But they didn't tell anyone, and people in Libya used mines waste products for building and landscaping, including in school projects and ice rinks. As a result, nearly 10% of the town population died from asbestos-related illness, and the people who died weren't always miners. The asbestos fibers that cause the health problem are easy to pass to other people. According to Mesothelioma Health Organization, the town effectively had spent decades operating under a toxic cloud. The mine closed in 1990, but the town issue didn't become well known until 1999. And in 2009, the US government declared an emergency in Libya to clean up the town, according to The Guardian. By then, it was too late. Hundreds of people have passed away from asbestos-related health issues. Thousands more have experienced illness, and new deaths and disease were still being reported as late as 2018 due to the long-term effect on these poisonous substances. The U.S. government's Environmental Protection Agency investigated more than 8,000 properties in Libya and had to determine more than 3,000 different sites where asbestos was used in construction. More than 1 million cubic yards of material was replaced and over the course of the cleanup projects, and more than $500 million were spent to decontaminate the town. Contaminated material is now stored safely at the site of the farmer mine, and the project has only begun to slow down in past couples of years. No wonder, as it's become the biggest asbestos cleanup project in U.S. history. Number 6 is Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Oil spills are among the most visible man-made disasters of our times, and 2010 Deepwater Horizon incident is reputed to be the largest marine oil spill in history. The name comes from drilling apparatus at the center of the incident. The Deepwater Horizon oil rig was a floating platform that was drilling an exploratory oil well around 18,300 feet below sea level in Gulf of Mexico. As Level Science has previously reported that in itself was not a problem and the rig was operating well within its limit. But on April 20, 2010, methane gas from the underwater well expanded and rose into the drilling rig, where it ignited and exploded. The explosion quickly engulfed an entire drilling platform, killing 11 workers and 94 crew members were evacuated. 2 days later, the rig had sunk. By that point, though, a vast oil slick had emerged from the underwater well and had begun to spill at the site. BP, the company that contracted Deepwater Horizon ship for exploratory drilling, tried to halt the leak with a remote-controlled underwater vehicle, a 37-ton contaminated dome, and by drilling a secondary well, but the oil flowed for 87 days. It's estimated 210 million gallons of oil were leaked from the underwater well. That the spill directly affected 70,000 square miles ocean in Gulf of Mexico. Eventually, the oil was contained, either dispersed or cleaned up using several different methods of thousands of volunteers. By then, though the environmental impact was being felt on a global scale, the Deepwater Horizon spill killed millions of animals, and incident affected wildlife and ecosystem across the several U.S. states and beyond. Number 5 is the Bhopal disaster. On December 2, 1984, there was a gas leak at a pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, according to Atlantic. It was caused by malfunctioning safety system and had a runaway pressure increase. 40 tons of chemical called methyl isocyanate leak into the atmosphere. That's a huge amount of toxic material, and the plant was surrounded by densely packed housing. More than 6 lakh people were exposed to deadly cloud. The people living around the plant were not informed quickly, and hospital staff were given conflicting information about the situation. Innocent people suffered from coughing, eye irritation, burn, breathlessness, and vomiting, and the thousands of people died within hours. As Life Science has previously reported, thousands of animals passed away too. Longer-term studies since that accident have confirmed that mainly thousands of people were still affected by eye and lung psychological damage, and even today it's hard to say exactly how many people have suffered. Number 4. Sidoarjo Mud Volcano. Most people think of lava flowing from volcano, but in Sidoarjo, Indonesia, you will find the world's biggest mud volcano. It was created by an explosion at a gas well drilled by an energy company, although the company official claimed that an earthquake around 155 miles away provoked the problem. There are more than 1,000 mud volcanoes around the world, but this Indonesian example is probably the only one caused by human activity, according to the journal Mud Volcanoes Geodynamic and Seismicity. It all started on May 28, 2006, when a borehole was drilled to nearly 10,000 feet. This caused water, steam, and gas to erupt from the ground nearby, and By the next day, water, steam, and mud began to emerge again, and it's been there ever since. It's officially called Lumpur Limpondo, and is commonly called the Lucy volcano. Initially, a volcano erupted with more than 6.3 million cubic feet for mud per day. According to the BBC, 11 people were killed during the pipeline explosion, and 30,000 people were evacuated from the area. The dozens villages and more than 10,000 homes were destroyed. Metal from the mud flows is contaminated nearby rivers, according to the news site Boston. Number 3 is North Pacific Garbage Patch. There aren't many man-made disasters that are as large as visible as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. There's nothing particularly complicated about what's going on here, and the huge amount of rubbish has made its way into the ocean over the past decade because of the negligent humans. The patch stretches from the California coast all the way across the Pacific Ocean to Japan, and it's actually comprised of two different tracks to trash, one of the western side of the ocean and other to the east, according to the National Geographic. Current combined to suck rubbish into the vortex, and these tiny objects can't escape. A Great Pacific Garbage Patch isn't just made up of crisp packets and drinks bottles. Most of plastic in the patch has broken down into the tiny pieces that simply make water look cloudy, and ecologists estimated that 70% of the ocean debris sink into the bottom of the sea, so there could be far more below the surface. The patch size varies. Estimate the range it is between around 270,000 and 5.8 million square miles, depending on sea movement. Some of the items in the patch are over 70 years old, because plastic just aren't biodegradable. Scientists reckon that it's becoming 10 times bigger than every passing decade, despite attempts to tackle the problem, according to the CBS News. Unsurprisingly, the patch has terrible effect on wildlife. Marine animals can get caught in bits of plastic or in abandoned fishing nets, which can quickly lead to death. Animals can die when they mistake plastic items for food. The patch has also a huge and harmful impact on the ocean's ecosystem and the food chain, because plastic on the surface of the water can block sunlight from the algae and plankton of pollutants and can leak from different types of plastics. Number 2 is Californian wildlife. Climate change has seen wildlife become far more common threat around the world, and 2018 saw huge areas of California affected by some of the worst fires in recent memory. More than 100 people died in more than 8,500 fires across the California, and the fires destroyed more than 24,000 buildings and burned into 2 million acres of the land. Most of the fires in California took place in July and August, and the government declared a national disaster. There is no doubt the fire was a man-made disaster. The year that preceded that, fires saw an increase in temperature due to the climate change, and that killed plenty of trees in California, and those dead, dry trees provide ample fuel for the fire to spread. Scientists predict that this kind of disaster is only going to become more common because of the climate change, so California extreme weather may soon feel normal. Sadly, it has significant health effect on people too. Number 1 is the Jilin chemical plant explosion. This incident took place in Chinese city of Jilin, November 2005, and saw a series of explosions at a petrochemical plant. In immediate aftermath of the blast, more than 10,000 people were evacuated from the local area, according to the New York Times. That's bad enough, but it's not full story. The explosion released around 110 tons of pollutants into the Songhua River, and that was a big deal because several large cities depend on that river for their water supply, according to the Environmental Emergency Center. Supplies were cut off from several days while the water supplies were cleaned up, and water had to be transferred from unaffected cities to help people cope. Some cities dug deep water wells to ensure that they won't be totally dependent on rivers for their water supplies. Toxins from the original explosion didn't just affect Chinese water supplies either. The chemicals were detected in Russia cities and the Sea of Japan. So this is how I defined world's worst man-made disasters, and I'm sure you have enjoyed the content because you're still watching. Like to the video and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.